PlayStation has discussed the future console strategy and said it's committed to, quote, exploring a new and enhanced way for players, end quote, to engage with games, and that the future of the platform is, quote, top of mind. Sony Interactive Entertainment's new president and CEO, Hideaki Nishino, was asked during a business segment meeting about the future of PlayStation console hardware and whether it could be superseded by cloud gaming. Nishino emphasized that PlayStation now has multiple generations of experience providing players with cloud-based gameplay and stated that while he views it as a viable option for players, he believes overall demand remains for the, quote, local execution of games. Quote, cloud streaming is progressing well from a... Let me take that again. Cloud streaming is progressing well from a technical standpoint, as we have demonstrated with our offerings. But end-to-end network stability is not in our control, Nishino said. And the higher cost per playtime compared to the traditional console model remains a challenge. Cloud gaming is increasingly providing an additional option for players to access content, but our belief is that the majority of players continue to want to experience gaming through local execution without dependency on network conditions. And PS5 and PS5 Pro have validated this thesis, I believe. The CEO went on to reference how Sony's console business has evolved into a multifaceted platform with a significant portion of its 124 million monthly active users still playing on PlayStation 4. Quote, we now have a large ecosystem of highly engaged players across both the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 generations. So naturally, therefore, there's a huge interest in our next generation console strategy. While we cannot share further details at this stage, the future of the platform is top of mind. We are committed to exploring a new and enhanced way for players to engage with our content and services. According to documents published as part of the court battle over Microsoft's Activision Blizzard acquisition, Sony doesn't expect to launch its next-gen console until 2028 at the earliest. Sony has reportedly contracted AMD to design and fabricate the PlayStation 6's chips due to the company's prioritization of backwards compatibility. SIE's SVP of Finance and Corporate Development, Lynn Azar, was then asked in Friday's business segment interview if Sony expects to see an impact on profits in the year its next console launches, and as has been typical with past consoles. Azar again emphasized the point that Sony's players are now engaged across multiple platforms, including PS4, PS5, and PC, and noted that the vast majority of its revenue now comes from subscriptions and microtransactions, which should provide protection during any future platform migration. Quote, as Nishino-san mentioned, we're still exploring what the future of our platform would look like. So, therefore, whilst we cannot provide any further guidance on operating income in future years, I'd like to reemphasize that our financial profile as a business has evolved in line with our strategy. So, we've reduced traditional cyclicality, this word right here, this one.
Cyclicity?
Cyclicity. You're right. Cyclicity. That's a hard word.
Cyclicity.
As you describe, the cycles.
Yeah.
We're done with cycles, is what he's saying. As you describe it, by establishing a large ecosystem of players across both the PS4 and PS5 generations, which provides recurring revenues. So, this has driven overall high and stable level of spend on content and services, which, by the way, now constitute over 2/3 of our revenue, providing a consistent, predictable, and profitable base of our revenue. Azar added, PS5 represents our most engaged players, with the highest spend per player versus prior generations. Our PS4 players as well are still active and spending as well. So by providing players with increasing options of how to access the platform, we're able to better target the different play patterns and monetization profits of different customer segments. And as we continue to drive a multi-generational ecosystem into the future, we'll provide new ways for players to access the platform and experience our content and services. So, Connor, the PlayStation 6 is coming. Surprise, surprise. But does that matter to your average gamer?
I don't think so. So, there was another story that broke this.
Neither do I, but I think maybe for different reasons.
Well, to bring it over to Xbox for a second.
Ha.
Recently, Witcher 4 got a tech demo. People were talking about that. And this week, CD Projekt Red devs were talking about how they weren't sure that Witcher 4 is going to hit 60 FPS at the Xbox Series X.
S or X?
X and S. Oh, fuck. Oh, shit.
I don't know what
Point
you're
is-
talking about here, so yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah, Xbox Series X. Yes, compared to the Series X. Point still remains, though, that consoles are in a weird place where if you were to ask most gamers, they would say, where are we going to go from here? PS5 kind of already provides the high fidelity games that you're expecting, at least the highest of fidelity games that are out there right now. All the things we've seen come down the pipeline, it doesn't seem like any of the strong modern consoles wouldn't be able to handle them. And so it almost seems to me like this is just a case of them trying to rationalize it to themselves to already release a PlayStation 6, even though they don't necessarily have to. Because something I've noticed with PlayStation is that whenever they
if their plans are 2028 and the console launched in 2020, that's 8 years.
It is.
That's a normal cycle.
It's a normal cycle, but even they admit that that's kind of going by the wayside now. And so will most people look at it and see it as a thing to buy in the same way they did with the PS5? No, I don't think they will. I think that's for the best, seeing as how the rollout of those consoles, like the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, were so problematic with so many people wanting them that it took some people up to a year of actively trying to get a console, to actually get one. And so it seems like from a distribution perspective, they wouldn't really see a reason to not provide a higher advanced console. Since again, even though we're talking in the confines of the console space, PC shows you have more room to go up. Do you need to, though? No. But what's stopping them from doing so? Since they'll have a base of consumers that'll buy it because it's the new PlayStation thing, and another part of people who will always want to have the greatest new tech that they can get, maybe someone who doesn't have a PC but still just wants to stay in the console space would jump at the chance to get a new upgraded version. And then, if you have a new PlayStation come out, even if right now you don't need to, the games you're making can still be played on the PS5 very, very comfortably down the line with the life cycle of, the expanded life cycle of the PlayStation 5 and the natural life cycle of this PS6, if it ends up coming out. At a certain point, there would be a shift in the game-making process to where, oh, wait, now you need something more than just a PS5 to play it. And so I see this as a way that what do they really have to lose by making a new console, since the way, consoles are, rolled out with Xbox, with Nintendo, aren't done the same way they used to be. You could just kind of prep yourself for how the games industry landscape is going to change down the line. So when I first heard this story, I kind of was thinking to myself, this is stupid, you're jumping the gun, but why not jump the gun at this stage? What do you have to lose?
I still don't think I don't think we're getting it until at least 2028, like their files with the acquisition show. My thing about it is, it's just like, how much does this matter for your average guy? And I agree with you, it doesn't. Not really. I think we've kind of like formed a bit of like a with technology and price point, a bit of like a pyramid here, where your baseline stuff that yes is not as good is substantially cheaper though and more accessible for people to play, whereas your higher end stuff where things are going to be super nice and look the best and run the best is going to be more expensive, and that's going to be for the hyper enthusiasts. I'm talking the ones even higher who really care about their specs more than you and I do, right?
Because to bring it to that, I was saying before, the average consumer won't really want to go and buy a PS6. I don't think we would either. Like you and me, we don't need to.
Maybe not. Yeah, maybe not at launch with the way that so many PS4 games carried over into, or so many PS5 games went backwards into the PS4 generation. You could play games like God of War Ragnarok on your PlayStation 4. It would take a key title for me to go, okay, now it's time for me to jump the ship. Or if there was like a huge technological difference between the two, which I just don't believe that there would be in this modern era. Now, there would come a time where I would feel the need to upgrade, of course, because technology is going to continuously evolve and upgrade and get better and better and better. But I don't buy a new phone every time a new phone comes out. I don't upgrade my PC every time a new graphics card comes out. Like I just don't. It takes a couple of years. I need to start registering that games are not running as well as they could be on my PS5 in comparison to a PS6, but at that point, probably even a PS6 Pro in order to really care. And now that we have these mid-gen refreshes with the Pro series of consoles, yeah, I don't foresee myself as someone who's been a diehard PlayStation player in the ecosystem for pretty much my entire life. I don't see the need to buy a PlayStation 6 with how the 5 has been treating me right now. But on top of that, when the PS6 Pro inevitably comes out, or whatever they call it, the equivalent of 3 to 4 years into that life cycle, when they put out another one, that might be my jumping in point.
Which would be funny because I never go into the Pro consoles. I never see the point in it because I'm not so.
Oh, there was but between 4 and 4 Pro, there was a point.
Fair enough, but like the PS5 Pro.
I don't see a point. I don't see a point in that. No. Undeniably, it's better. Undeniably, yeah. But my the game runs better. It's able to render more.
But do I care?
It's prettier. Yeah, do I care? No, not really. But every cycle and a half of consoles, I might start caring and so forth. And then now it just becomes less about how quickly do we get to those cycles and just where each individual consumer is with their cycle. If I'm at a 5 and I decide, I don't want to jump in until 6 Pro, well, then that's a cycle and a half. And then maybe I'm on a cycle and a half thing. So maybe I don't get the 7. Maybe I don't even get the 7 Pro. Maybe I just wait till the 8 or whatever. And that's the choice that the gamer now has to have, the consumer now has to have. They have to have the intelligence and do the research in order to figure out, okay, what's the next upgrade for me personally that I want to do. And the baseline thing with consoles that matters the most is just that it is plug in and play. Whether it's through a download, whether it's through cloud stream, disc-based media is going away, so maybe not that anymore. But whether it's through a download or a cloud stream, I agree with them. The being able to do it on the local, no connection to hardware, execution still matters. It's still going to matter for the next 10 years, easily, right? At some point, it won't. At some point in our lifetimes, it won't. But
why concern ourselves with that now?
Not a problem right now.
Yeah.
Not a problem right now. Now, this is, I think, showing us where Xbox's change in strategy, I think, is working or is planned to work for the long term, where they just understand that gamers want to play everything, everywhere, wherever they are in that moment. So that's why systems like Xbox Play Anywhere are in effect. That's why the cloud streaming facet of Xbox has been in effect for years, And PlayStation is working with that. They're not forgetting that on the side. Like, it still exists. They talk about it here. Like, yeah, we've done some cloud streaming stuff. Yes, clearly it's effective. Yes, clearly, it's something we want to continue doing. But there's still the element of you wanna be able to play regardless of the network that you're on. And it's also interesting to me that they bring up the facet of revenue with consoles. Revenue typically goes down because you're spending so much in manufacturing that it hurts profits, right? But it allows people to buy the PlayStation, whatever, at a loss for Sony, so then they can buy software at a profit. And now they're saying, oh, dude, like over 2/3 of our revenue is through subscription services, microtransactions, or just smaller transactions. And the people who stay up to date with their technology are continuously buying more and more. So it, like, for them, their focus is always going to be on who has the most modern stuff, and that's a range. When the PS6 comes out, they're still going to care about PlayStation 5 players. But I'll tell you who they're not going to care about. Mm-hmm. That 120 million PS4 players, y'all going to have to jump over at some point. Now, maybe if you're on a PS4, you don't feel the need to buy a PS6 when it comes out, but you might start looking at that PS5 Pro a little bit differently.
All which will be cheaper than they are now. So
ideally, hopefully,
If not, something's wrong.
Something's wrong.
Yeah,
something's very wrong. But that's the idea, right? Is like, hey, I didn't feel the need to jump to a PlayStation 5. Mm. You and I did, but they didn't. You know,
I mean,
perfectly valid.
A thing we don't really feel the need to do right now that'll change is the Nintendo Switch 2. Like, when that came out, I wasn't like, oh shit, I need to buy it. Because I would buy it and I'd be like, yeah, this plays better than my current Switch. But besides that, Mario Kart, I wouldn't play that a lot in my free time. I'd play that with friends and somebody would probably have it at that point. Now,
I don't know,
again,
I'm looking at that Donkey Kong and going, oof, you know?
see, that's going to change with things like that. I'm not like even still rushing to get Donkey Kong, but I'll play it.
Yeah.
I want to. Point is that the need to buy the new console as soon as possible isn't around anymore. It's going away.
I wouldn't. Nintendo Switch 2 sold 3.5 million in its first week. It's the best-selling Nintendo console ever at this point.
But Nintendo's always been the exception where they're going to do well, regardless of how the other aspects of the console market are going on. Like the PS5 and the Xbox Series X could be pretty not well liked, and Nintendo would still be making tons of money. Or if they were like massively popular as they are, they'd still be making a lot of money because it's Nintendo.
Sure, yeah, but how long? Like,
how long would that last?
How long does that last when the focus becomes where can I play my game, not how well can it run? Because at some point it's just all going to plateau.
But even still, Nintendo is Nintendo, and you won't. Even if you say I want to play my games wherever, those aren't going to include Nintendo games with however Xbox does it or PlayStation does it.
I mean, it all entirely depends because, we're constantly bumping up against this conversation of, well, how much detail, how much fidelity do you want in your game versus how long it takes to make that game versus how much stress it puts on a development team versus if the increasing budget versus the profitability of the game matters in the grand scheme of things. We have the conversation of all the time of we are okay with how games looked 5 to 10 years ago. We're okay with that. They would still sell really well today. You look at the landscape today. There's a bunch of games out here that are great hits that don't look necessarily the best. There are plenty of games that are, crazy good and sell like hotcakes and so forth. But like at some point, like, does it matter? And then you get into the conversation of AI and using AI in development and how that could speed things along and make things cheaper and all these things. So yeah, it's just the constantly like balancing of all the spinning plates of price, consumer interest, technical fidelity, and what it costs to make that technology versus using actual artists to create the art. Like all of these different things have to be balanced all at the same time in this medium because it is a technology-based art form.
And, this whole conversation is a lot more interesting than I would have initially thought because, again, when I hear PS6, I'm just thinking, okay, they're trying to just, do what they've always done. They're continuing the trend, and it's, same old news, but it's going to have a different effect than it has in the past. But there is reason to put out a PS6 in this changing console gaming market. So.
And again, we're not getting it this holiday season. Like this is still 2-3 years away.
It's top of mind, which means it's not even like hardline.
If you're 2 or 3 years away from a new console launch, it should be top of your mind.
Yeah.
Like that should be you should be looking at these different tech companies and going, okay, can you make new chips for us? That should be where we are at. Like this is a very normal console cycle. It's just we are now hyper aware of all of the updates where before we weren't.
Yeah.
You didn't know how your PS4 was made. You just knew it got made eventually.
It was probably made in China or something like
that.
Now
we have too much access to too much information that the general populace just doesn't need. So now we see headlines like PS6 is coming, and we all go, oh, nothing happened on the PlayStation 5. Well, yeah, nothing has happened yet, but you got another 3 years of the PS5 generation.
Maybe it'll explode.
And usually, the end of the generation is almost always more interesting than the beginning of it. Usually.
Yeah.
There's examples in 64 where that, begs to differ.
PlayStation 2 is probably as well.
What is in the early PS2? I don't know the PS2 library well enough in terms of dates to say that.
Yeah,
PS2
it seems like
came out 2002.
That console seems like it hit the ground running though.
I think that's purely just because games were easier and cheaper to make, and so you could make more of them and you could make them faster.
Fair.
So you got 5 Ratchet and Clank games. You got including the spinoffs. You got 2.5 Metal Gears. And then just a bunch of other random stuff filling out the Sly Coopers, Jack and Daxter's. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of Crash and Spyro games still kicking around at that point. So and not to mention, what is Siphon Filter popping at this time? I don't even know. I don't know. So it's just a different time, different era, different way of making things, but now it's all about how big can these games get. Oh, okay. Oh shit, we don't care.